I was walking through the neighborhood recently with a guy I know, one of those people who prides himself on being, a model citizen.
Okay.
He's constantly posting on the community board about civic duty and keeping the streets pristine. To him, following the rules isn't just a habit, it's a core part of his identity.
Right, I know the type.
Exactly. But then we hit a snag. His dog stopped to do its business on this pristine, manicured lawn, and when he reached for a bag, his pockets came up empty.
Ah, the classic moment of truth.
It was. I watched this internal struggle play out in real time. He froze, looking down at the mess, then did this frantic, shifty-eyed scan of the windows and the street.
Seeing if the coast is clear?
Totally. And seeing it was, he just nudged the dog and walked away, leaving it right there.
Wow.
So when I caught up and jokingly pointed it out, I expected him to just say, oops, I forgot. But he didn't. His expression shifted instantly from guilty to weirdly defensive.
Oh, this is good.
He looked me dead in the eye and said, actually, using a plastic bag to preserve biodegradable matter in a landfill is the real crime. I'm technically doing the soil a favor.
No, he did not. That is incredible.
A masterclass in mental gymnastics. In less than 10 seconds, he rewrote his entire moral code from rule follower to radical environmentalist just to stop that stinging feeling of being a hypocrite. That squirmy, uncomfortable tension he felt and the desperate logic he invented to make it go away is a perfect window into the psychological tug-of-war we're exploring today. That deep internal pressure to keep our story straight, that squirmy, uncomfortable sensation you just mentioned, it's this powerful phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance.
It really is. And your story is a perfect illustration of the theory Leon Festinger laid out way back in 1957.
And the core idea is pretty simple, right?
It's very simple. The idea is that we as individuals seek consistency among our cognitions.
And when we say cognitions, we mean what exactly?
We mean any element of knowledge, so your thoughts, your behaviors, attitudes, values, beliefs, anything.
So when two of those clash,
They create what he called an aversive mental state. That's the tension, that's the dissonance. And it actively motivates us, often without us even realizing it, to get back to a state of harmony.
so the brain basically craves harmony, and it will do almost anything to get it.
It will expend a huge amount of energy to find it.
So in my friend's case, his belief was, I am an environmentally conscious, rule-abiding member of society.
Right.
But his behavior was, I just littered and ignored a civic duty. The internal clash is, it's instant. The mind has to solve that problem.
It has to.
And so our mission in this deep dive is to unpack that whole mechanism, not just what the feeling is, but the incredible, sometimes bizarre lengths we go to in our health, our spending, our jobs, and our relationships to make that feeling go away. So let's start with the mechanics of it. We've established that this discomfort, this dissonance, is a powerful engine for change.
A very powerful one.
So once that clash happens, what are the main routes our brain takes to, get rid of that tension?
Well, we can break it down into three main strategies, and you could sort of think of them in terms of how much effort they take.
Okay.
The first path is the most straightforward, but it's often the hardest one to actually do, and that is change a cognition or behavior.
The direct fix.
Exactly. If you believe smoking is bad for you, and you smoke, the simplest, most logical way to resolve that conflict is to quit smoking. Now, your behavior matches your belief.
That makes perfect sense on paper. But changing a behavior that's deeply ingrained or a core belief about who you are, that can feel almost impossible.
It takes a tremendous amount of psychological capital, which is why we so often drift to the second and third paths.
Okay, so what's path number 2?
The second strategy is to change the environment or avoid information.
So you don't let the conflict happen in the first place.
Precisely. You actively select friends, news sources, situations that confirm what you already believe. So if you have really strong political views, you might surround yourself with people who agree with you.
You avoid the mental stress that comes from constantly hearing things that clash with your worldview.
That's the psychological root of the echo chamber. It's not always about malice. It's about protecting our own internal consistency.
Which leads us to the third path, which sounds like where the real mental gymnastics come in.
This is where it gets really interesting. Path 3 is adding or eliminating cognitions. This is the world of rationalization and trivialization.
Okay, break that down.
You either add new thoughts that support your behavior, or you just decide the whole inconsistency isn't that important anyway. Your friend who decided leaving the dog mess was an environmental favor.
He was adding a new, powerful, if totally made-up cognition to support his action.
Yes. He didn't have to change his identity as a rule follower, and he didn't have to go back and do the hard thing. He just relabeled the bad behavior as a good one.
So he reduced the importance of the conflict without changing a thing.
And this brings us to this core idea in the theory, sometimes called the hydraulic model of dissonance reduction.
The hydraulic model, okay.
It's about how the brain chooses between these three options. You've got changing your behavior, changing your environment, or rationalizing. Which one does it pick?
Well, the brain is an energy-saving machine, so I'm guessing it picks the easiest route.
Absolutely. The hydraulic model says we will always choose the path of least psychological resistance.
So if quitting smoking is really, really hard,
then the brain is much more likely to choose an easier option, like trivializing the risk or rationalizing the behavior. We unconsciously massage the facts because it takes way less energy than changing our core actions.
which is why rationalization is everywhere. It's cheap psychologically.
It is. But what's really crucial here is that Festinger's original theory was all about this drive for pure consistency. Later on, researchers started to wonder if it was about something deeper.
Something more than just A clashing with B.
Exactly. They started to think it wasn't just about consistency, but about protecting the self.
Okay, so let's get into these alternative theories. First up is the self-concept theory from Elliot Aronson in 1969. How did he change the game?
Aronson argued that the dissonance isn't just from any two conflicting ideas. It's specifically from threats to an individual's positive self-concept.
So the tension isn't just logical, it's personal. It's my action conflicts with my belief that I am a good, smart, moral person.
Precisely. The dissonance comes from the gap between who I believe I am and what I just did. So if I see myself as a good husband, but I was just rude to my wife, the dissonance is really a threat to my self-image as a good husband.
Which makes the motivation all about maintaining that positive self-perception.
Exactly. And this was backed up in a really dramatic way by Steele and Liu's work on self-affirmation in 1983.
What did they find?
They found that if you gave people a chance to affirm some other, totally unrelated part of their positive self-concept, like reminding them they're a good artist or that they're politically active, they didn't need to change their attitude about the dissonant thing they just did.
Wait, hold on. That's a huge departure from Festinger. You're saying if I feel bad about lying to someone, I can make that bad feeling go away by reminding myself that I'm a really good cook, even though those two things have zero connection.
Functionally, yes. If the goal is to repair a bruised ego, you can use any psychological bandage that boosts your self-image. It suggests the real goal isn't just consistency, it's maintaining self-integrity.
That feels much more human. It feels like ego defense.
It is. But then you have a theory that comes along and basically throws the whole bad feeling idea out the window. And that's self-perception theory from Daryl Bem in 1965.
A non-motivational explanation.
Right. Bem argued that the squirmy feeling, the psychological arousal, isn't necessary at all. He said we figure out our own attitudes by just observing our own behavior, like an outsider would.
So if I see myself spending an hour on a boring task for no real reason,
you don't feel bad about it. You just sort of look at your own actions and conclude, well, I must have enjoyed that task. Why else would I have done it?
So he could explain all the results of the classic experiments without needing any kind of internal uncomfortable feeling.
Exactly. And that was a huge challenge to Festinger's work. If there's no discomfort, there's no motivation to change.
So how did they prove that the feeling was real? How did they put the motivation back into the theory?
This is where a 1974 study by Zana and Cooper became so important. They used the classic write an essay against your beliefs setup. But they gave participants a placebo pill.
Okay.
They told one group the pill would make them feel tense. They told another group the pill would make them feel relaxed.
And everyone wrote the essay, which should create that internal tension.
Yes, but the key was attribution. The group that was told the pill would make them tense, they didn't change their attitude.
Why not?
Because they felt the tension, but they blamed it on the pill. They had an external excuse for their internal feeling. They thought, oh, I feel tense, but it's just a side effect of this drug.
That's the smoking gun.
It is.
If they thought the discomfort was from the outside, they didn't feel any need to resolve the internal conflict. The feeling has to be blamed on your own hypocrisy for the attitude change to happen.
And that pretty much refuted Bem's non-motivational argument. And then finally, you get the new look perspective from Cooper and Fazio in 1984.
And they refined the idea even more.
They did. They suggested that dissonance only really kicks in when our counter-attitudinal behavior produces aversive consequences.
So it's not enough to just be inconsistent. Your inconsistency has to actually cause a negative outcome.
Correct. The dissonance gets dialed way up if your action harms someone or misleads them. So if you promote a political idea you secretly hate, that's one thing. But if your promotion actually persuades people to believe that idea,
then consequences are real, and the dissonance is way more intense. It becomes about personal responsibility.
Exactly. So we've moved from a simple drive for logical consistency to a need to protect our ego, and finally to a drive to avoid feeling responsible for bad outcomes. But the common thread is this incredibly powerful engine that forces us to change something when our inner and outer worlds don't match.
So to really understand how powerful that engine is, we have to look at the classic experiments that first isolated it. They all use something called the force compliance paradigm.
Yes, and the absolute key ingredient in this paradigm is perceived choice.
The person has to feel like they chose to do the thing that violates their beliefs.
It's crucial. If they feel like they were forced or coerced, they can just blame the external pressure. They can say, my boss made me do it. And there's no dissonance. Their attitude doesn't have to change at all.
So the whole experiment is about getting someone to feel like they own their hypocritical action. Which brings us to the most famous one of all, the Induced Compliance study. The one with the $1 and the $20.
The boring spool-turning task.
Yeah.
Participants spent an hour doing this incredibly dull, repetitive task.
Just mind-numbingly boring.
Then they were asked to lie to the next person in the waiting room, to tell them the task was actually fun and interesting.
And some were paid a lot to tell this lie, $20, which was a good amount of money back then.
And some were paid a pittance.
Yeah.
Just $1.
And the whole theory hinges on justification. If I get paid $20 to tell a tiny lie, the math is easy. I'm an honest person, but $20 is $20.
Exactly. The $20 provides plenty of external justification. The dissonance is low, but the people who only got $1.
They had a huge problem. I'm an honest person, but I just lied for basically no reason for a single buck.
The external justification just wasn't there. So following that hydraulic model, what's the path of least resistance?
Well, admitting you're a hypocrite who lies for no reason is tough. It must be easier to just change your mind about the task.
And that is exactly what happened. The $1 group started to genuinely believe their own lie. In the follow-up survey, they rated the boring task as being significantly more interesting and enjoyable.
They changed their memory of reality to justify their actions.
Their attitudes followed their behavior. And we see this all the time in the real world with post-decisional dissonance. It's the official name for buyer's remorse.
Right, that feeling you get after any big decision, especially when you have to choose between two really good options, two great job offers, two really nice cars.
The moment you choose one, you've rejected the other. And that creates dissonance because you're giving up all the good things about the option you didn't pick.
So to reduce that anxiety, your brain immediately gets to work.
It starts reevaluating. You start to amplify all the good things about the car you did buy, and you start to find faults with the one you didn't buy.
The classic sour grapes strategy. The car I passed on probably had terrible gas mileage anyway. You retroactively change the value of things to make your choice feel like the only correct one.
Then you've got effort justification. This is a big one. The core finding is simple. The more effort, pain, time, money you put into achieving something, the more you will value it.
This explains why people who go through really difficult or embarrassing initiation rituals for a group
end up liking the group more.
Right.
Precisely. They've paid this huge price to get in. If the group turns out to be just, okay, the dissonance would be massive. I went through all that for this.
So to justify the effort, they have to convince themselves the group is amazing, exclusive, and incredibly valuable.
The intensity of the effort demands an intensely positive valuation of the outcome. Otherwise, the whole equation is out of balance.
And that's the sunk cost fallacy in a nutshell, right? We stay in bad investments or bad relationships because we've already put so much effort in.
We have to keep believing it's valuable to justify the cost we've already paid. And finally, there are the deterrence studies. These look at forbidden behaviors.
This was the one with the kids and the toy, right?
Yes. Researchers told kids not to play with a really desirable toy. Some kids were given a strong threat of punishment if they touched it.
Like, you'll be grounded for a week.
A very strong threat. Other kids were given a very mild threat, something like, please don't play with that toy.
And the results were completely counterintuitive.
They were. The kids who obeyed the weak order ended up liking the toy less than the kids who obeyed the strong order.
So why does the strength of the command make such a difference?
Well, if the threat is strong, the kid has a great external reason for not playing with the toy. I didn't touch it because I didn't want to get grounded. Low dissonance. The toy stays desirable.
But with the weak threat, there's not enough external justification. The kid wants the toy, but they're obeying this very mild request.
Exactly. So they have to invent an internal justification. Their brain concludes, I must not have played with it because I don't actually like that toy very much.
Their attitude toward the toy itself changes to line up with their behavior.
It's the path of least resistance. And what all these experiments show is that the magic formula for changing attitudes is commitment to an action, combined with not enough external justification for it. When you have those two things, the brain's internal pressure cooker takes over and reshapes reality.
If we're looking for a real-world example of this dissonance engine in action, there's probably no better case study than smoking.
It's the poster child for cognitive dissonance. You have this massive, undeniable conflict.
On one hand, I value my health, I want to live a long life. And on the other, I engage in an addictive behavior that is very likely to kill me. The gap is just enormous.
And because quitting is so incredibly difficult, you're fighting addiction, routine, social habits, the theory predicts that smokers are far more likely to just adjust their beliefs and rationalize than they are to actually change the behavior.
The path of least resistance is to tell a different story.
Exactly. And we have some powerful data on this from a huge longitudinal study that tracks smokers across multiple countries: Canada, the US, the UK, Australia.
And what did that data show about how these rationalizations work over time?
It gave really compelling evidence that the rationalizations are a direct consequence of the behavior, not the cause.
Okay, so how did they show that?
Well, for starters, the continuing smokers always had the highest levels of rationalizations. But the real insight came from looking at the people whose behavior changed.
So let's start with the successful quitters.
The successful quitters showed a huge immediate drop in their rationalizations right after they quit. As soon as their behavior changed, the dissonance was gone. So the psychological need for all those justifications just vanished.
The mental shields come down once the threat is gone.
Exactly. And then you look at the people who tried to quit but failed, the relapsers.
What happened with them?
They saw a massive rebound effect. The moment they started smoking again, their rationalizations shot right back up to where they were before, sometimes even higher.
Wow. So as soon as the dissonant behavior comes back, the brain immediately rebuilds all the defensive walls.
It's an almost instantaneous process. It really shows that the beliefs are just a shield that follows the action.
And the study went even deeper than that, right? It looked at the types of rationalizations people use.
It did, which speaks directly to that hydraulic model we talked about. They sorted the rationalizations into two main types.
What were they?
The first type was functional beliefs. These are the very subjective, very personal justifications. Things like, smoking helps me concentrate, or it calms me down when I'm stressed, or I just enjoy it too much.
So they're things that are very hard for an outsider to argue with. They're internal.
Exactly. The second type was risk-minimizing beliefs. These are the ones that try to downplay the danger. The medical evidence is exaggerated, or my grandpa smoked his whole life and lived to be 90, or it's no more risky than driving a car.
And those are much more constrained by, scientific reality.
Very much so. And the key finding was that the magnitude of belief change was way greater for the functional beliefs.
So it was easier to tell yourself, it calms me down, than it was to tell yourself, cancer isn't real.
Precisely. The brain takes the path of least resistance. It's easier to pump up the subjective benefits than it is to deny objective scientific fact.
That's a huge insight for public health campaigns. Just hammering people with facts about risk might just make them double down on the functional benefits argument.
It can. And this leads us to a great case study on how these campaigns, by intentionally creating dissonance, can sometimes backfire. We have the story of Budi in Jakarta.
Right. Budi was a devoted father, but also a heavy chain smoker. And he was surrounded by these very graphic anti-smoking billboards. The campaign was designed using what's called the hypocrisy paradigm,
which is a tactic that's all about forcing someone to confront the gap between their values and their actions. For Budi, the conflict was huge. I am a good father who protects my family.
Versus the billboard showing him that my smoking could kill my child. The dissonance must have been intense.
Immense. So he had two choices: quit smoking, which is very hard, or he chose to rationalize.
Yeah.
But he did it in a fascinating way. He attacked the source of the conflict. He decided the graphic warnings were all just Western propaganda.
So he reframed the evidence as biased and not applicable to him.
Exactly. By doing that, he protected his identity as a good father and as a smart person who isn't fooled by foreign influence. He resolved the dissonance without having to change the difficult behavior.
So the campaign worked. It created the dissonance, but he just chose the easiest escape hatch.
Which is a powerful reminder that creating dissonance is only half the battle.
Let's shift from health choices to financial ones, because this is a massive billion-dollar problem for companies. We're talking about post-purchase dissonance or buyer's remorse.
It's the anxiety that kicks in right after any big, committed purchase. The conflict is really sharp. I'm a smart, responsible person who makes good financial choices.
And that clashes with the nagging thought, did I just make a huge mistake? Did I overpay for this? Was the other one better?
And that anxiety is poison for a brand. It leads to returns, bad reviews, and customers who never come back.
So smart marketers have to get ahead of it. They have to manage that internal psychological storm for the customer.
Let's use the example of Sarah, the person who buys an $80,000 luxury electric car. She's agonized over it for weeks. The second she drives off the lot, the excitement can fade, and that panic sets in.
Her identity as a frugal, responsible saver is now at war with the reality of this huge new expense.
So what does she do? She has to reduce that dissonance. She needs to prove to herself that this wasn't an indulgence, it was a brilliant investment.
And she does that by actively seeking out information that supports her decision.
Classic dissonance reduction. She starts binging glowing YouTube reviews of her exact car. She reads articles about the long-term savings of EVs. She joins the exclusive owners forums, where everyone is patting each other on the back for making such a great choice.
She's building a fortress of confirming evidence to shut down her own inner critic.
Unconsciously, yes. And marketers know this impulse is coming, so they proactively give the customer the ammunition they need.
What are some of those specific tactics?
Well, the first is immediate post-purchase communication. That personalized thank you email, the welcome to the family message. It provides tips, offers help. It validates the decision right away.
It reframes it from a loss of money into the start of a positive relationship.
Second is the strategic use of customer testimonials and social proof. Plastering high ratings and great reviews everywhere helps the new buyer feel safe. The logic is, look at all these other smart people who made the same choice. I must be smart too.
It sort of outsources the justification to the crowd.
It does. A third one, which is fascinating, is guarantees and return policies. Offering a really generous money-back guarantee dramatically lowers that initial anxiety.
Because the commitment feels less permanent.
Exactly. The dissonance is lower because you know you can undo the decision. Most people never will. But the existence of that safety net is what provides the psychological comfort to commit in the first place.
Okay, what else?
Clear and honest messaging. This is just basic transparency. If you overpromise, the customer's expectation will clash with reality, and that creates instant dissonance. You have to set realistic expectations from the start.
That makes sense.
Then there's personalized follow-up content. So for Sarah's car, maybe it's an email with tips on maximizing battery life. For fitness equipment, it's a weekly workout plan. It constantly reminds the customer the value of what they bought.
It keeps reinforcing the "this was a good decision" belief.
And finally, loyalty programs.
Yeah.
Making customers feel like they're part of an exclusive club.
Right.
Giving them special discounts or early access provides a powerful psychological reason to stay committed. It tells them, you were smart to choose us, and here's your reward. It makes the psychological cost of switching to a competitor much, much higher.
Now, this isn't just a personal or consumer struggle. It's a huge issue inside organizations, especially during periods of big change. It's often the real reason for employee resistance.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
You see employees who dig their heels in and refuse to adopt a new system that is clearly better, faster, cheaper. It looks irrational from the outside.
But on the inside, it's about protecting their identity.
That's the core of it. The change threatens their self-concept. Let's take the example of Mr. Tanaka, a senior manager in Osaka. He's built a 30-year career on mastering these intricate manual logistics systems. He's the expert.
His whole identity at work is tied to this old system.
Right. Then the company says, we're moving everything to a new AI cloud platform. The unspoken message to him is, your 3 decades of expertise are now obsolete.
That belief, my life's work is now worthless, is in a violent clash with his identity. I am a competent, valuable, respected leader.
The dissonance is huge. So to protect that self-concept, he doesn't admit he's scared or that he doesn't want to learn. Instead, he rationalizes. He frames his resistance as a moral crusade for quality.
He starts saying the AI lacks the human touch, or he magnifies every tiny glitch into this catastrophic failure.
He transforms himself from a resistant employee into the guardian of quality. The new system is the villain, and he's the hero protecting the company from it. It's a brilliant unconscious strategy to protect his ego.
So what's the right way for leadership to handle that?
They can't frame him as a victim of progress. They have to use dissonance theory to their advantage. They need to reframe the narrative. They tell him his deep experience is essential, that he needs to be the AI's teacher and validate its outputs.
So you align his identity as the competent expert with the new behavior of using the AI.
You make him indispensable to the transition. You've turned a resistor into an advocate by resolving his dissonance in a productive way.
And the same mechanism commitment justifying your attitude, we see it in politics too.
For sure. The simple act of voting for a candidate makes people like that candidate more after the election.
Post-decisional dissonance on a national scale.
Exactly. You've made a commitment. To feel good about that commitment, you have to justify it. So you start to focus only on the candidate's good qualities and ignore or downplay their flaws.
Because the psychological price of admitting I voted for the wrong person is just too high for most people to pay.
So the brain makes sure you believe you made the right choice.
And we can scale this all the way up to one of the biggest challenges we face, which is moral and global dissonance around something like climate change.
The cognitive load there is just staggering. You have the belief climate change is a scientifically proven catastrophic threat.
And that belief is clashing with the daily reality of our behavior. I continue to fly, drive a gas car, and consume in a way that contributes to the problem.
The dissonance is huge, and it's constant. And this is where that path of least resistance becomes so critical.
Because changing our entire lifestyle is incredibly difficult, inconvenient, and expensive.
So the hydraulic model predicts that for many people, it's psychologically easier to change the beliefs about the threat. You downplay the severity, you focus on any uncertainty in the science, you question the model.
So that's psychologically cheaper than admitting your daily life is part of a destructive system.
Exactly. We psychologically discount a distant future threat to avoid the immediate cost and inconvenience of changing our behavior right now.
Before we wrap up, is there any physical evidence for this in the brain? Can we actually see this conflict happening?
We can. The early neuroscience on this is fascinating. It looks like the arousal of dissonance, the moment your brain detects the conflict, is linked to activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC.
And the ACC is basically the brain's alarm system.
It's the conflict monitor. It's the same part that lights up during the Stroop test when you see the word blue printed in red ink and have to say the color. The ACC fires off a warning, conflict detected, something's not right here.
So it's a literal hypocrisy alert going off in our heads.
In a way, yes. And even more interesting, some research suggests that the resolution, the successful reduction of that dissonance through attitude change, is associated with increased activity in the left prefrontal cortex.
So we can see both the detection of the problem and the brain's often creative solution to it.
It seems so. There's a measurable neurological process that corresponds to this psychological journey.
Looking at all this, the smoking study was consistent across 4 different Western countries, which suggests this mechanism is pretty universal, at least in those cultures. But does culture change how it works?
It does, but in a subtle way. The drive for consistency seems to be universal, but the culture tells you what you need to be consistent with.
What do you mean?
Well, studies have shown that in more individualistic cultures, like the US, dissonance is often triggered by purely internal conflicts, my actions clashing with my personal values.
Okay.
But in more collectivist cultures, like Japan, researchers found that dissonance was much more intense when the person's behavior was inconsistent with their attitudes, but specifically when they were primed to think about important others, their family, their social group.
So the conflict isn't as big a deal until it's seen through the eyes of the group. The social context is what triggers the threat to the self.
Exactly. The basic engine is the same, but culture defines what kind of inconsistency is important enough to defend against.
So when you step back, understanding all this isn't really about judging people for being hypocrites. It's a lens for understanding the deep unconscious forces that shape how we think and act.
It's the brain's primary tool for maintaining a coherent story about who we are. We are constantly trying to keep our actions, our beliefs, and our personal history all lined up so we can keep believing I am a rational, moral person who makes good choices.
And as we've seen in every single example, from the dog mess to the expensive car, we are usually the last person to see our own dissonance in action.
Well, the defenses are designed to be invisible to us. That's
What?
their job, to protect the ego. Our friends, our family, they can often see the mental gymnastics and the rationalizations long before we have any conscious clue what we're doing. We have seen how knowledge, whether it is a medical warning, a purchase decision, or a new corporate strategy, always comes into contact with the fierce human need for self-integrity.
What's truly fascinating is realizing that the friction point isn't always about right or wrong, but about ease. The mind, presented with the agonizing choice between changing a central belief or changing a difficult behavior, will almost always choose the path of least psychological resistance. Next time you find yourself passionately arguing a point or suddenly feeling defensive about a decision you've made, remember that the intensity of your conviction might not be a sign of absolute certainty, but rather the force field your brain is generating to protect you from the discomfort of an internal contradiction.